Here's an interesting question. What is considered mad? What is considered intelligent? And what is considered genius? Ford Prefect in Douglas Adams' what was it? The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, yes, said that the line between madness and genius is very thin. Half a Dent immediately tried making a joke about the Berlin Wall being very thin. Or very narrow. Unfortunately, I didn't get the joke because I was too young at the time. And even Ford Prefect didn't get the reference. But I think that line between genius and madness is indeed very thin. Very narrow, as it were. You could say it's slightly ironic I'm talking about madness when I'm driving to the local psychiatric hospital to pick up a visitor. So you may find that the weather's a bit mad and so's the light. So apologies for that. But it does make us wonder what is the standard of intelligence and therefore the standard by which we judge madness. That, unfortunately, is highly subjective. I covered in a video how we would sound totally insane if we went back to the late Iron Age or even the medieval period and tried to explain the concept of cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, all that sort of stuff. We may think we're more intelligent than people of the past, but in actual fact we're not. They were just as intelligent, they just put it into different ways. I'm pretty sure, in terms of an IQ test, they would rank more or less the same, but in completely different areas. And more importantly, whilst we may consider ourselves total geniuses these days, we would not survive at all in days before electricity. I remember when I worked in Heritage, one lad said that he doubted he could last a day without the internet. And I remember thinking to myself, this generation is doomed. But being fully in character, I couldn't say as such. So, can we have an objective standard for madness? I suppose we can in a way. And can we have a subjective standard of morality as well? Again, that is certainly possible. But then, when we start questioning intelligence and how things roll over, our understanding of what is right and what is wrong could easily spill out of control. You may say, yes, there are cases where people have been pardoned because our understanding of truth and whatnot has changed, our understanding of the law. But unfortunately, that's more understanding the cases. The classic example I can think of is the case of Derek Bentley, where whilst he was, I think he was at least 18, maybe something like 20, even that, and old enough to be held criminally responsible and therefore hung. He unfortunately, was around the mental age of 10, maybe even 12. So whilst we could say our understanding of mental health has improved significantly, and that I would agree with, I don't think that had any bearing on the case itself. And certainly not why he was eventually pardoned posthumously, but he was pardoned. One other thing we have to consider when it comes to madness is our examination of new ideas. These days we've got all manner of bureaucratic forms that we have to fill in before we can introduce a new idea into public. And in fact, you could say that's why the electric car is still struggling to get off the ground. The infrastructure just isn't there. Certainly in Scotland it's not. Most people need to have pod points. I've looked at the local car parks. I think there's only 2 or 3 that even have a charging station. And most of them are at supermarkets. Furthermore, here's something interesting. One mad idea was the idea of a propellerless plane, a propless plane. That was tested during, I don't remember when it was, just after World War II, to the beginning of the Cold War, something like that. That was tested, but whilst the idea of a propellerless plane was bandied about, in order to make it seem completely unrealistic, the Americans apparently had the test pilot go up in the plane in a gorilla mask. So yes, all they need to do was just say, so you saw a gorilla flying an aeroplane without a propeller. You've definitely gone mad, sir. Many people might say that was them gaslighting their own pilots, which I suppose in a way was the case, but it wasn't making them feel like they were going mad posthumously. No, it was making the entire story completely ridiculous, just by adding one extra ridiculousness. You may say that the idea of Jesus Christ dying and rising from the dead is ridiculous. Why would they believe such a thing even now? Considering, though, that back then the idea of people rising from the dead was actually well established in Jewish law and was later written down in the Book of Revelations, that the dead would rise again to face their judgment. It is perfectly reasonable. One thing though, I'd always tell people whenever we were doing the warrior quest when I worked in Heritage, was listen to everyone in your group. They may have a different idea to you, but it could be the right idea. So listen to everyone. It was a good way of ensuring that no one felt left out, and that no one felt ignored. Plus, it was hopefully going to ensure they didn't just run off. That they would listen to everyone and read everything. Or just start running after the other group who are going in a completely different direction. There is also an African proverb. When the fool speaks, the wise man listens. And interestingly enough, just today I was talking to someone about gossip, about how there are so many conflicting stories that you can basically just get a broad idea of what happened. The incident we were talking about was when a well-known member of the community, well, apparently well-known, I didn't know him at all, died of anaphylaxis, and the only thing I could confirm was that it probably happened on a street that same day had been closed off by the police. You may ask, why am I mentioning this mad idea, these mad things, and conflicting stories, when that is basically the story of the resurrection? That the only consistency was that Jesus rose again. I would say the consistent thing is the key point, the bones of the story. And that is something we have to remember. I did a video on the flood, the Great Biblical Flood. I'll try and link that video in the description if I remember to do that. That tells that it could possibly have been, in fact most likely was, an oral story. And having studied oral storytelling under a master storyteller, and having friends who work in that industry, I think that the story of the flood is actually fairly reasonable to understand as an oral story. It has consistencies throughout, no matter what phrasing the story you have it. Be it God brought the flood down, the flood was foreseen, it was caused by others, or whatever. Either way, the world was wicked, there was a flood. Noah gathered up the animals in the ark and outlasted the flood. Most of the details, 40 days and 40 nights, and many days beyond that, it has a ring to it that could be added as detail. That's the thing, when stories start diverging, that is the point you can start questioning, not the actual consistent part. Now you may say that there was an experiment where someone did point out something that was completely wrong about the situation, and that was the consistent thing. But I have to wonder, who would have benefited from saying that Jesus rose again? I don't think anyone could have. Not in that situation. There was literally no way. I'm willing to do the research and find out. And if anyone else wants to do the research, then by all means do. My customer's waiting for me, so I have to cut that video section in half. Let's see where else I can go with this video, because why am I bothering to mention all of this in relation to religion, which many people even consider mad? Well, strangely enough, and I know many people are going to be very upset with me for mentioning this, so trigger warning. Many people say autism is in fact not a disorder, but the next stage in human evolution. Same with ADHD, quite possibly. Now, it's certainly possible that those sort of things were occurring throughout history. And personally, I don't see any reason why not. What has this got to do with madness? Well, certainly back in those days, they would have thought autism, Asperger's, ADHD, certainly in Victorian times for that matter, they would have been seen as madness. People would have been institutionalised, people would have been ostracised in society, sometimes might have even been killed. There are even some tribes that kick them out into the wild or even kill them. Hunt them and kill them. But strangely enough, the best case to explain my argument has to be in, what was it called? Ah yes, the movie, the 100-year-old man who climbed out of a window and disappeared. It's an amazing film, I'd always recommend watching it. There's one point where he was, I'm not sure if he was deliberately or accidentally involved in the Manhattan Project, creating the nuclear bomb. This was a very interesting situation because he was most likely ADHD, most likely autistic, something like that. And genuinely just enjoyed blowing things up. He blew up things as a kid, blew up things as an adult. I think he became an engineer in the army. Maybe a fusilier or something like that, I don't know the exact terms. But he had the idea to, I think it was, make the section separating the two cores of uranium to make the section out of the explosive that would force them to ignite, or something like that. I don't know the exact details. But that is showing that you can rely on a mad person to give a crazy idea that might work. That's the thing. People expect conventional ideas. And the moment you start doing some of those radically different, that's when they call it mad. But if it works, then it works. I think there's a saying, if it works, it isn't stupid. Even if it looks completely mad. It's like one of those mini series of pictures, often captioned, "Why Women Live Longer," showing men doing very stupid things that just happen to work. My response is normally, women may live longer, but men live more. Just because you don't understand what's going on doesn't mean that their idea is totally stupid. No. Here's an interesting idea that happened in the, I'm trying to think, early 1900s, I think. Yeah. In order to save space for your child, where's a sensible place to put the crib? Why not hanging out the window in a cage? That persisted in America and Britain for many years, but strangely enough died out in the Blitz. It may seem totally mad for us these days, but back then it was perfectly reasonable. It saved space, and yet your child was safe. Nothing wrong with that. Sometimes madness is simply people having completely different ideas to you. So different, in fact, that you do not understand them at all. You may call it outside the box thinking, or even anti-dogmatic thinking. This does fall into the argument, though, of who has the more imagination. The atheists, who think of the ideas that keep the world rotating around us, as it were, but somehow don't involve God, or the theists, who always have God somewhere in their thoughts. You may say that being creative might also just mean having a wild imagination, and therefore you can think of all manner of wacky stuff. But interestingly enough, I always find that the great philosophers who intrigue me the most are ones that use their faith in their works, primarily people like Tolkien or C.S. Lewis. Often they show that the concepts behind their works that inspire them are the very things that actually give them, are built in their faith, but also can be seen in their works. The best example I can think of is when in C.S. Lewis's work, I think it was mentioned in Prince Caspian and later in the Voyage of the Dawn Treader, Aslan said that no one is ever told what would have happened. That shows that the concept of multiple futures as a result of free will was an understood concept, at least by C.S. Lewis, a devout Catholic. So, does that mean we need to listen to every single mad hat idea just because they're not accepting evidence? Well, listen, yes. Try to see where they're coming from, yes. Take them seriously, not necessarily. If you take your time to understand where they're coming from, you can actually get a better idea of how to give them an answer that they might understand, that they might accept, and therefore make the discussion far more applicable, far more friendly, far more civil. Am I defending the mad? Am I defending the flat earthers, the tinfoil hats? Probably. But at some point I'm going to do a video, or maybe just a ramble, on the differences between those things. So stay tuned for that. The takeaway: remember, don't dismiss an idea because you don't understand it. I don't understand how the very concept of speed going so fast that you end up coming back much, much later is even a sensible idea in the first place. Those of you may be realising I'm talking about the speed of light and Einstein's theory of relativity surrounding it. That was a difficult word to pronounce at that point. Remember. I don't understand relativity. I don't understand how it even applies. In fact, I want some experiments done, or at least to see if there are any experiments done, that will question the speed of light relative to the speed of a moving object, or a moving light source, or if someone has figured out the absolute universal speed limit. I'm not talking about light itself, I'm talking about whether there is a speed at which we can get somewhere in the shortest time possible without generating any relative effects. So what is literally the universal speed limit? Another one would be what genuinely affects the fabric of space-time. Is it mass or is it speed? Or what property of those two combined genuinely affects it? If it's mostly mass, then it's most likely momentum. If it's mostly speed, then it's most likely kinetic energy. And that is how I think we can figure out how to go faster than light. Or anything to do with time travel itself. Whether it's an item of speed or an item of mass. So, remember, ideas that seem mad could very well just be something you don't understand. Be willing to do your research. Be willing to keep an open mind. And just because you don't understand it, don't dismiss it. Because quite possibly the madman has the answers. You may say there are plenty of people in disaster stories who mention things going mad or them being mad. and mentioning tidings of doom. And they are proven right. I'm not saying keep an eye out for that sort of person. At the end of days. But it's best not to dismiss stupid ideas because you don't understand them. So stay humble. Keep an open mind. Stay safe. And God be with you.